Hello, my friends, and welcome to Mrs. Q Live from Hanover Square, New York City. I'll wait a few minutes for all of you to join in, give you a chance to join us tonight. Hopefully, we'll have an excellent time talking about American history. And be sure in the chat to say hello so I know who's here. I know we have a lot of regulars like to join us, so it would be great to see you all here, for you to say hello and let me know that you're there. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the year 1788. So I am in my later home, as it would look in 1788, with my hairstyle from 1788. And we're going to be talking about the debates over ratification of the Constitution and some of the more amusing dialogue that was taking place in New York at the time. And hello to LB Girl. It's great to see you tonight. See who else is here. Let me take a look. See who else is here. There's a few people here with us. And we're going to have a really good time, I hope. Hopefully no interruptions like we had last week. Of course, last week we had an amusing, shall I say, diversion for a short time. And hopefully there'll be no need for that tonight. And I have on this 18th century bedgown, or we might call it a robe, and it fits very differently from something we'd wear today, so I'm never quite used to it. Mr. Davis is here. Here we go, Mr. Tulloch. Mr. Tulloch would like to know, in your time, did people observe the Northern Lights, and what did they think of them? Yes, of course, in my time, we were very in tune to celestial events, and many of the men in the town were amateur astronomers, and people kept a very close eye on the sky. And some of us even think that there might be people on other planets, although others roundly reject that as speculation. Ms. Marzoff is here, and Ms. Kane is here. Hi, good to see you too. And oh my goodness, Mr. Richard and Janice are here, my rebel friends from the South. And so it's great to have all of you here. John the Beagle Dad, excellent. It's good to see you too. If you don't know, some of you are seeing some of this and some of you aren't. It's because I'm streaming on both YouTube and Facebook. So I try to read everyone's questions and comments. So whichever platform you're on that you're not seeing them, you'll know what I'm talking about. And please, of course, be sure while you're watching to like the video, subscribe to my Mrs. Q History channel, and share it with people who you think would love to know more about the founding of our nation. I know where all of you different guys are currently in the year 2025, the people are seeing the Northern Lights, and I haven't been able to see it where I am because it's been so cloudy. So Mr. Q and I have been sad to miss out on that, as Mr. Q himself is an amateur astronomer in 2025, not in 1788. And we have Ms. Longo is here. She's asked me to please say hello to Chrissy. Hi, Chrissy. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining me tonight. Mrs. Q, did you ever get to meet George Washington? I met George Washington on many occasions, and I think there are videos here on my YouTube channel of me speaking to General Washington and many different battle reenactments. I know there are a number of me speaking to him at the Battle of Long Island at the Old Stone House, and there is one from July 9th. I don't recall what year I posted it, when we reenacted the reading of the Declaration of Independence, and you can see me speaking to General Washington there. And of course, in that summer of 1776, while I was living in New York and the military was in New York, I had many occasions to run into the general, and we became quite fond of each other during that time. So yes, I do know now coming up to be President Washington. So next year in 1789, he will become president. And tonight we're going to be talking about the debate over whether or not to ratify the Constitution that then made General Washington President Washington. Mr. Facemeyer is here from Virginia. Manassas, thank you so much for joining me tonight. So it is 1788, and as you may know, there is a rigorous debate happening over whether or not to ratify the Constitution that came out of the Federal Convention at Philadelphia last year. And this document is highly controversial, both in the way that it was crafted and what it says. And there are many questions about what type of government it will create and what it means for the individual states if it is created. Now, there are many articles on both sides of this, filling up our newspapers day after day after day. As a matter of fact, the day after the Constitution was printed and began distribution for the public to read it, there were already letters in the newspaper here opposed to it. So that means people who were in that convention somehow got word out to people outside of the convention what was in the document. So they already had arguments against it prepared. Ms. Longo is from Pennsylvania. Mrs. Q Live is in Hanover Square, New York, but Mrs. Q 2025 is in Pennsylvania, I think you know. Oh, Ms. Robbins is here. Mr. Robbins is here, removing his hat and taking a deep bow. It is humble service, Madam Q. Well, Mr. Robbins, thank you so much for joining me tonight. So what's been vexing many of the ladies as they have come into my shop and expressed to me is the proliferation of articles written by someone who goes by the name of Publius. And I wonder in your time if you know who Publius is. Of course, we know who Publius is, but I think you might know Publius better as something you call the Federalist Papers. Although in 1788, they are not known as that, they're known as the Publius Letters. And in case you're not aware of who Publius is, I have a picture for you so that you can see who these gentlemen are that are publishing as the name Publius. And you might recognize them: Mr. Alexander Hamilton, Mr. James Madison, and Mr. John Jay are what is known as Publius. And they have been bombarding us with letters constantly about why the Constitution ought to be ratified. Now, some people will say that these gentlemen have written these letters simply as an explanation to explain what is in their Constitution. But others who know better know that these three gentlemen would not be explaining what is in their document if so many people hadn't been opposed and questioning it. In other words, if they weren't forced to do so, they would find no need to explain what type of government they are planning to provide for us. Otherwise, there would be no debate, it would be ratified, and that's what we would have. But instead, there have been many voices from Massachusetts to Georgia questioning so many things that are in their Constitution that they have taken up the pen and have been writing a series of letters refuting those complaints and explaining, they say, more clearly what is in their document. Now, I think in your time, you may have your history downplays the amount of opposition there is in 1788 to this new United States Constitution. There's a great deal of opposition to it, hundreds of letters and articles in opposition to it, many of them here in New York, and some I would like to share with you. So one of the things that Publius and the printers who favor them are doing is they're reprinting the letters in many publications many times over. So some days we may get two of them in multiple newspapers because they are of the belief that the more something is printed and the more people see it in different places, why, the more likely they'll be to believe it's true. But I think we all know a little bit better than that, don't we? And so today, in the New York Journal, a very amusing letter appeared on behalf of a number of squeamish ladies. I have a picture of that for you. Where are there's our squeamish ladies. So this is to Mr. Greenleaf, who is the publisher of the New York Journal or the Patriotic Register. And this is what our letter says. Well, not my letter, but what the letter says that amused us so much when we saw it. Mr. Greenleaf, a number of squeamish ladies around their breakfast table last Monday determined not to read your newspaper anymore. Today, a number of gentlemen who subscribe for your paper merely for the variety and to have an opportunity of seeing the arguments as fully as possible on both sides have expressed as much disgust at you for cramming us with the voluminous Publius as for disturbing our appetites with your Examiner. And just to let you know, Examiner is another writer who is supporting Publius, but is not one of those three gentlemen. We take Maclean to read Publius in the best edition, and he gives us two at a time, and Childs for the daily news and advertisements, but same as Publius at our expense. For the daily news and advertisements, but they are curtailed, and we are disappointed for the purpose of serving up the same Publius at our expense. So they are saying they read Mr. Maclean's paper for the best version of Publius, and they read Mr. Childs' paper for advertisements and daily news. But lately, Mr. Childs has been shortchanging them on events because he is publishing Publius as well. And he says, we read Loudon for his morality and evangelic sentiments, but here again, we are imposed on by being made to pay for the very same Publius, who has become nauseous by having been served up to us no less than in two other papers on the same day. Now, sir, it seems you have the assurance, notwithstanding your professions, to induce us to subscribe, to give us Publius a fourth time before breakfast, and no less than two at a time. Pray, Mr. Greenleaf, adhere to the principles and professions you set out on, and let us have wished for variety, or return the money which you have taken on subscription. Do not be so irresolute as to be frightened out of your duty by any pert adventurer, whose principles may be despotic from habit in the wars, and whose ideas of government cannot be satisfied with less than military execution. For a man whose sentiments have been vitiated by one profession will not easily recover virtuous dispositions by another. This new mode of abridging the liberty of the press in New York also is not a favorable symptom, but do not encourage the presumptive attempt of that author to occupy a greater proportion of the public highway than decently comes to his share. And this is signed by 27 subscribers. Someone says, John the Beagle Dad wants to know if these are broadsides. No, sir, these are articles appearing in the newspapers. And in this case, this appeared in Mr. Greenleaf's New York Journal in January of 1788. So these 27 gentlemen are saying, everywhere we look, we find Publius. We look for variety in all of our newspapers, yet everywhere we look, we find Publius. And Mr. Greenleaf, if all you're going to do is repeat these Publius letters, well, please return our subscriptions, because that is not what we believe we are paying for. So you see, some people here in New York are growing tired of the constant ravings of Publius. Now, to find the appropriate counter letters, those being issued by a gentleman, or shall I say gentleman, called Cato, one might find them in only one newspaper, or perhaps two, printed one time. Yet here we have Publius everywhere. Everywhere we look, if it's a morning edition or an afternoon edition of the newspaper, there is Publius. And apparently 3 ladies in this town who cannot take it anymore are refusing to read Mr. Greenleaf's paper at all anymore. So a very fun and amusing letter to Mr. Greenleaf. Now we have another interesting letter, and unfortunately I don't have a copy of this for you. I was not able to find one in a suitable condition to share with you. And this is also a letter to New York American Magazine by Miss Jemima Loveleap. And I leave it to you to decide if this is a serious letter or if this is a lady poking some fun in a satirical letter. And Miss Jemima Loveleaf says, "Sir, I was highly delighted when I first saw your proposals for printing a magazine in this city. It gratified my pride to think New York would have a magazine, as well as London and Philadelphia. You must know, sir, that we females have many good ideas to communicate as well as men, but talking will not answer our purpose. Our opinions must be committed to paper before they have their proper effect, and your magazine is the place. Now, sir, it struck my mind as soon as I saw your proposals that there is something ominous in your beginning the publication on the 1st of January, 1788. I cannot but predict some good fortune for young ladies, for the union of 288 is a lucky omen. I remember to have heard or read somewhere that Mr. Pope, the celebrated poet, was born in the year 1688, the same year that the great comet appeared and frightened everybody, but without doing any harm. Everybody remembers that the union of 3777 took Burgoyne and prepared the way for the French alliance. And here she's speaking of the year 1777, or 3 sevens. My grandmother has often told me that she was married in the year 1722, and that she has had good luck whenever 2 or 3 figures of the same shape meet together. But my editor, my hopes of good luck the coming year are not a little strengthened by the shape of the 2 figures. I submit it to your judgment, sir, whether the figure 8 does not look like a chain and indicate a tie or connection. And then 288 together, why, I'm sure they look like the bride and bridegroom side by side, or all this must forebode something clever. But Mr. Editor, it is leap year too. I've often been informed that leap year is very favorable for bachelors, and if so, why not for ladies too? I have observed in our almanac that leap year is called also bisextile. I hardly know what to make of this word. I suspect it to be Latin, and I find in my brother's Latin dictionary a word something like it, but I am not satisfied to the meaning, although I have reason to think it means a connection between the sexes. If so, it is a lucky year indeed. It is not probable, Mr. Editor, that the new Constitution will be adopted in the year 1788. Our politicians all say that when this time takes place, times will be better, trade will flourish, and then I think the young men can get good livings and support families. In short, sir, the ladies are generally federal, and I cannot see a reason why the gentlemen should be otherwise. I am now in the 22nd year of my age, and I foresee 1,000 happy events in the year 1788. If you are a bachelor, Mr. Editor, I am confident your wishes will correspond with those of your humble servant, Jemima Loveleaf. So, very interesting little letter here. And I wonder, are the ladies all federal? I don't think so. I don't think the ladies are all federal. There is a very outspoken lady in Massachusetts who certainly is not federal and is a very famous lady, Mercy Otis Warren. And there are many more here in New York City itself who are not of the federal mind. Although I must confess that most of my city is in favor of the Constitution, is in favor of this type of what they call federalism, although we can debate whether it's truly federalism or something else, which is what Cato and many of the writers writing against ratification are suggesting. It would seem that the centers where there is a great deal of trade, money, finance, are in favor of the federal Constitution. So we find more support in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, while those who live outside of the cities are less in favor of ratification of the document, as they feel it will unfairly benefit those financial power centers, which I should also tell you is where we find all of the lawyers. All of the lawyers. How many writers of the Constitution were lawyers, do you know? Virtually all of them. Almost the entire federal convention was filled with lawyers. And these three gentlemen here, oh, where did they go? Where is our three gentlemen? Hold on just a moment. Oh, such handsome and dignified portraits. I love seeing them and having the portraits here for you. Of our three gentlemen who write as Publius, two of them are practicing lawyers right here in New York, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. J. Both of them also graduates of King's College, Mr. Madison being a graduate of the College of New Jersey or Princeton. And why do I mention that they are both graduates of King's College? Why? King's College was an Anglican college at the time they attended, which, although they said they would not, certainly instilled a feeling of love to the mother country, England, right? Because the Anglican Church was the official Church of England. So we might say that these two gentlemen might have an affinity for the English way. And you might say, but Mrs. Q, they were both leaders of the American Revolution. They were both outspoken rebels. Why Mr. J attended the Continental Congress, and I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton. And Mr. Hamilton wrote all of those letters about separating from England and served as an officer in the military. How could you say that they had an affinity for the British way? Well, may I just suggest to you, just for your consideration, that they may have had an affinity for the British way, but did not want to be under British rule. Think about that. And so after the war was completed, it became time to propose, or they believed time to propose a new government, that their government would very much resemble the English way due to their own affinity to that way. Now, did you know Mr. Adams, who also is remembered as a great rebel, isn't he? Mr. Adams suggested that the presidency be hereditary, like a monarch. And others suggested that the Senate seats be hereditary, would make them just like the House of Lords. Although I believe it is Mr. Sentinel in Philadelphia who has written, which has been echoed by other people, has written that the Senate will indeed be like the House of Lords and be an aristocratic body, having the gentlemen sitting for 6 long years with no requirement that they rotate out of that position, and therefore will acquire influence and wealth enough to keep themselves in office for a lifetime. So the prediction on the part of these gentlemen is that the Senate will mirror the House of Lords eventually. So some very interesting debate, and that the executive branch is very much like a monarch, but even more powerful than a monarch. And many of the letters against ratification are exploring these criticisms. Now, I mentioned that Mr. Hamilton and Mr. J, both lawyers from New York, educated at King's College, yet Mr. Madison was educated at the College of New Jersey, a Presbyterian college, and is from the great state of Virginia, with many gentlemen who have spoken out against the ratification of this document. Yet here we find Mr. Madison. So we can only wonder what happened to Mr. Madison, that he found himself in alliance with these two gentlemen. Perhaps in the future, we'll understand why. Or perhaps in the future, Mr. Madison will find his way and break from these two gentlemen. Time will tell. Mr. Linden says the channel A Fork in Time is now discussing what might have happened. I suppose, Mr. Linden, do you mean what would have happened if the Constitution was not ratified and we had amended the Articles of Confederation as planned? I think that's what you mean. Please clarify for me so I can better understand. So now, as you know, in New York, we have an excellent sense of humor. It is said we have the best sense of humor of anyone in our new nation, or our coming new nation, or whatever we are right now, as we are 13 independent states with, some sort of bonds between us that we're debating right now. Oh, Mr. Linden says, if Prince Heinrich of Prussia had responded to letters from Hamilton and others suggesting he should be king of America. Oh my goodness, Mr. Linton, I'm not getting into that tonight, but for those of you who don't know, he's speaking of letters from Hamilton to a prince in Prussia suggesting that he should be king of America. Well, doesn't that go right along with some of our gentlemen in New York who are saying that Mr. J and Mr. Hamilton might have all along been too fond of the British way? And before I get on to the next piece I would like to read you, may I just suggest something to you as you look back on our time? That when we come to the year 1776 and we ultimately do unite as a result of Thomas Paine's wonderful work in 1776, and please, if you are interested in Thomas Paine, this Sunday on Mrs. Q in the Future's Republic Broadcasting Network radio show, she will be discussing the life of Thomas Paine. So you might want to join her there to learn more about him. But when we come together in 1776 and ultimately issue our Declaration of Independence and fight our war, you should not assume in your time that all of the men who joined together to rebel against England did so with the same intentions. This is an easy mistake to make looking back on our time, I think, that you may simply assume that all of the men in favor of separating from England meant to establish a true republic form of government here. But they did not all intend to do that. Some of them wanted to break from England in order to establish something like England that would benefit them. Keep that in mind. If you ever sit down to read the debates over the Constitution, that is some of what is going on in the debates, that some of the people who rebelled against England were doing it to create something like England here, and others were doing it to truly create what they thought would provide the most liberty to people, a confederation of independent republics. And that's what our debate in 1788 is all about. Does this new government create a union of independent republics that grant liberties and freedoms to their own people? Or does it create one large government that then will supersede the rights guaranteed in those individual republics? Oh, my dog Rex has arrived. Hello, my dog Rex. So let me give you an example. So an example is in the Pennsylvania Constitution and the Virginia Constitution. By the way, when we separated from England with the Declaration of Independence, we now had no government, did we? We had no government. Therefore, the states had to go and ratify a government for themselves. So they each created their own governments by creating state constitutions, and thus the states were born. Some of those states have very specific bills of rights in them, guaranteed rights to the people of those states. Now, the Constitution that has come out of the convention that Publius is advocating for has no protection of those rights. And many of those rights go back to the Glorious Revolution of 1689 and were guaranteed to people as subjects of the crown. And so some of the gentlemen are asking, well, does that mean that this Constitution that does not guarantee these rights will then take away the rights the states have already guaranteed to their people? And we are waiting for a satisfactory response from Publius on issues like that to give you some understanding of a little bit of the debate that's going back and forth. Now, what do I have next for you? Do I have another picture for you? I think I may. Let me look. Oh, the satire of a Federalist. So it is well known that in the city of New York, we have the finest sense of humor in all of the American states, as we did when we were a colony. We New Yorkers can make fun of anything, and we do. Each other, our way of life, everyone else's way of life, and all manner of debate and discussion that could be taking place. So we find ourselves with a satire of what a Federalist is. And let me find my copy so I can read it for you. I don't have it ready. Hold on. I'm so sorry. This is the satire of a Federalist. And this is from a much longer piece that appeared in the newspaper, all about ratifying the Constitution from the Federalist point of view, from a satirical Federalist point of view. And the excerpt from this says, the great mass of the people are in a state of brutal ignorance, incapable of forming a rational idea, guided wholly by instinct, destitute of sensibility and all the exalted virtues. Mere orangutans, blockheads, numbskulls, asses, monkeys, sheep, owls, and lobsters, and only created to be subservient to the pleasures and interests of their superiors. They have no business to intermeddle with politics. If they can scrape together money enough to pay their taxes, they ought to be satisfied. All the offices of government are, by the laws of nature, appropriated to men of family, fortune, and genius. So this is a satire of what a Federalist is. My dog Rex says, my hair looks so difficult to construct. Where did you find the time? Butter needs to be churned. So, Rex, of course, you know I do not churn butter. I am a merchant lady, daughter of a very successful merchant and merchant before him. And there is someone else to churn the butter, so to speak. And plenty of time for someone to fix my hair for me. But thank you for asking. It's a very amusing question. So here we have a satire that your typical Federalist believes that the rest of the people are all numbskulls, asses, monkeys, sheep, owls, and lobsters, and way too stupid to have any role in government. And there are some on the anti-Constitution side. And, I like to refrain from calling them anti-Federalists because the gentlemen who have been tagged as anti-Federalists are the ones really, I think, who are advocating for true federalism. So let's call them anti-constitutionalists. So the anti-constitutionalists have written this about the Federalists, that they are trying to preserve an aristocracy, and they look down on all of the people as just inconsequential, and that the people should just obey them. And some have even suggested that the lower house of Congress, the House of Representatives, is nothing more than a farce and a joke, because everything that they will try to do then has to go through the approval of the aristocratic body, the Senate, and the monarchical body, the executive. So that's the argument coming from some of our anti-constitutionalists. My dog Rex says, evidently the people are butter churners. Indeed they are, and shoemakers, etc. So we have another funny little piece that is appearing in the paper, and I'm just going to put my background back to playing for you. Another interesting piece that has, this is one of the nobility, but there's more of it. I'm sorry, I got mixed up in the order I was going to show you things. This is more of that article, one of the nobility, but I want to share more of it with you. And the author says, although, sir, I am well born and expect to be honored with a considerable office when the new establishment takes place, yet you may rest assured of my real disinterestedness when I assert that the proposed government ought to be universally adopted without the least hesitation, examination, alteration, or amendment. Horace was unquestionably a wise man, and he observes, and here he has a Latin phrase which means, I hate the uninitiated and vulgar crowd, and I shun them. So he says, this is the motto of the Federalists. I hate the vulgar crowd, and I shun them. He says, have not our patriotic conventioneers imitated his example in constructing a constitution which effectually expels the nobility from public offices? Let the farmer, the merchant, and the mechanic reflect, if they are chosen to any dignified stations, that their farms and stores must suffer and their tools grow rusty. In other words, if they serve in the government, their farms will be destroyed, their tools will become rusty, and they'll lose their professions. Therefore, only those of us who are the idle rich and need not work have the time to serve in the government. And then he says, the great mass of the people are in a state of brutal ignorance, incapable of forming a rational idea, guided wholly by instinct, destitute of sensibility, and all the exalted virtues, and only created to be subservient to the pleasures and interest of their superiors. I have heard from people in your time that some of you believe this about the public in your time, that they are in a state of brutal ignorance and incapable of forming a rational idea. Does that mean that you in the future have all become aristocratic Federalists? I wonder why you would apply that to your time. As this satirist is applying it to our time. So they are saying that Misters Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, and their supporters here in New York are nothing more than aristocrats who have created a government to serve aristocrats very similar to the government we left, and that they look down on all of the people, and that what they have given the people in this Constitution are just some crumbs to satisfy them. And then, of course, they're so dumb they won't know better. It's an interesting point of view, isn't it? And so the anti-constitutionalists have spoken out on behalf of the people. And one of the things they have encouraged us is to not be pressured to ratify it too fast. Because you see, the reason for publishing Publius in every newspaper, every day, multiple times, is to rush everyone's decision. To, number one, make people think that, well, since all the printers are printing it, it must be true. Since I'm seeing it everywhere and everyone's talking about it and saying yes, it must be true. And since they're printing it so often, it must be urgent that we ratify. And of course, we are being presented with the argument that there is urgency involved here, that we must ratify as soon as possible to remedy all of the problems the states are having between them. So I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of a look at our debate going on over ratification of the Constitution. And just a reminder to you in your time that not everyone was fond of Publius. As a matter of fact, more people were not fond of Publius than who were. But since there was a greater population and greater wealth in the cities who were Federalists, there was more pressure to ratify. And many of the states, when they created their ratification conventions to decide, had a preponderance of people or only people in their ratification conventions from the cities who were Federalists. And I would include the state of Pennsylvania among them, who I think is going to be number 2 to ratify the Constitution. I think they want to be number 1, but I think they will be number 2. New York will be one of the very last, demanding a Bill of Rights in order to ratify. Not much, but at least something to push back on our Federalist friends. So I hope you enjoyed this very much. I enjoy meeting with you every Thursday. As I said, this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on republicbroadcasting.org, my 2025 self will be talking about the life of Thomas Paine, which is very, very fascinating, and also gets into a little bit of this debate over the Constitution and the Federalists versus the pro-constitutionalists versus the anti-constitutionalists, and how Thomas Paine felt about all of that, and also how Thomas Paine thought about President Washington, which might surprise you. You might want to join in Sunday night just to hear about Mr. Paine's thinking of President Washington's presidency. Might be different from things you have heard in your time. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, please like the video, share it with your friends who would enjoy seeing it. And I will see you again next week here in Hanover Square, New York City for Mrs. Q Live. Everyone have a wonderful week until I see you again. Thank you for joining me.